Back for a midweek edition of the Chant here on Warchant's Multimedia Network. He's Irish Raphael, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang, and this, if you haven't joined us yet, is our News Digest feature where we'll get with you on your pod feeds or here on Warchant TV and give you a rundown, news and notes of what's happened at Florida State with the football program over the last few days. And so, Ira, I think we're going to start in reverse chronological order as we're taping this on Thursday, August 21st. Interesting player interview. Very much so, and an interesting position coach interview as well. Jason Jenkins was the player. And is there a bigger winner, at least on defense, of the offseason, considering where Jason Jenkins was thought to be 5-6 months ago, than he is right here in this moment?
Yeah, it's really amazing, and it could have a huge impact on this team. I mean, Jason Jenkins was a guy, when he transferred out of Tennessee, we know Tennessee was not happy to lose him. A lot of schools were very interested in him because of his measurables. He's 6'6", 270 pounds, 265, 270. He's a defensive end, but can play a little bit in the middle because of his size. He told us that he's played anywhere from, the outside wide 9 technique, which is like the far outside pass rusher, to basically inside of the 2. So he's been kind of closer to the center at times as well. And I think we'll see, man. He may end up being a starting defensive end. I mean, we don't know yet. We assume Florida State will put out a depth chart next week. But yeah, man, when he went down with an Achilles injury in January, the talk was maybe you get him back at some point this season. He ended up coming back during preseason camp. He's doing everything. He says he's 100%. And it's awesome for him because that wouldn't be possible if he hadn't really busted his butt in rehab. But also, it really could be huge for this defensive line because we have questions about how much top-end talent they have. From everything we've heard, Jason Jenkins is a guy that has that top-end talent.
This is a refreshing story, too, because in this day, and you can say it objectively that this is refreshing, because in the era that we're living in right now, in college football, performance and compensation aren't tied together. So if you don't technically have to be incentivized through pay, like a game check or something like that. We're not in that time of college football and comp with rev shares and NIL. So if he wanted to take it easy on the rehab front, he could have, but this is a young man who's been clearly motivated, and you've heard about it consistently throughout the offseason, whether it's the summer check-ins that you would get with Mike Norvell, or as they got closer to camp and now in the preseason into Alabama prep, just about how hard he was working with all of the trainers, how hard he was working in that rehab. He doesn't get to this point without extreme will. So, again, this is more News Digest-y, but if you're looking for somebody to root for, this is an easy candidate of a kid to root for in his first game against Alabama.
Yeah, and he's a guy that I think is pretty emblematic of what we're seeing across this team. I really think that they did a good job with, and I don't know how much this played into the decisions with who they were getting out of the portal. But it does feel like when you look across the board, they got a lot of football players. Like they got a lot of guys who want to play football, who are dedicated, want to, just kind of pour it all out there and do everything they can to get out there. Now we'll see what it looks like when the season starts. But to hear Elijah Herring, who's a linebacker that also came in this year, and first of all, the way people talk about him and his work ethic. But I asked him this past week about Jason Jenkins because they played together at Tennessee a couple of years ago, and how he handled having the injury in the January, not knowing if he'd be available this season at any point, let alone early in the year. And he said, man, he just works so hard. It's cool to see how him get rewarded for how hard he worked to get back to this point. And he said, like, when they would talk about it, Jason Jenkins would always be like, man, I got to get back. I got to get back with you guys. I got to get back. We can do special things this season. So there's like a buy-in there that you always wonder about with transfer portal guys because, a lot of times it's a 1-year, 2-year rental. I think Jason Jenkins can have 2 years at Florida State if he wants them. If he has a big year with those measurables, he won't be here 2 years. We'll have to see how it plays out. But it's another indication of these are guys who are here for more of the right reasons, certainly than what we saw a year ago. And that, that has to bear out. We have to see what it looks like. If you get down in a game against Alabama, if you go on in a game or maybe you lose a game or 2 games during the season, how do those guys keep coming back? The signs from a guy like this, and I think we've seen a lot of examples of it, seem to be encouraging, at least as much as we can tell right now.
Yeah, now that's all that's left for Jason Jenkins is how many snaps does he play? What percentage of snaps does he play against Alabama? Mike Norvell spoke about him earlier in the week, and clearly Mike Norvell has been more cautious on that front. He was speaking on the ramp-up process to make sure he's in the best position possible to play. That continues a trend, Ira, going back to scrimmage number 1, where the word was from other Florida State coaches that Jason Jenkins could have played in scrimmage 1 in preseason camp. And Mike Norvell said, whoa, wait a minute. Let's make sure that we get you up to full speed. So, if there are 65 plays that Alabama runs, how many plays is Jenkins a part of the defensive front?
Whether the number is 15 plays or 30 plays or 35 plays or somewhere in between, the idea that you're going to have that quality of body on the field is just huge. And again, I don't know that anybody really expected it. It's almost like getting a free agent signing that's just a huge addition that maybe you didn't necessarily expect to have. They have a bunch of defensive linemen. They brought in Deontay McCray and Diamante Diggs, and you've got these younger defensive linemen that they're excited about. But there aren't a lot of guys walking around that are his size, 6'6", 270, his athletic ability, and have played in the SEC. Now, he didn't put up big stats at Tennessee, but he's played in the SEC. He's played in those games against those kinds of offensive linemen. Again, man, it's to me, it could be a game changer. I don't know if it's going to be a game changer against Alabama.
Right.
But to have a guy like that in your rotation, maybe at the top end of your rotation, it's again, Mike Norvell and the defense coaching staff just have to be really, really grateful and hope that he just stays healthy.
Yeah, if you look to ACC play, you can now expect that Jason Jenkins is going to be a humongous player for you in ACC play. And even that was in doubt just, a month ago, 6 weeks ago. Another person who was at the dais on Thursday was safeties coach Evan Cooper. And I'm wondering, Ira, being in the room, listening to him speak on a number of players from KJ Kirkland to Shaheem Brown, Edwin Joseph, is there anything in the battle at the safety position, anything that maybe Cooper said that changed your mind in handicapping how this might all shake out for FSU, or did it sound like Evan Cooper was confirming suspicions of where this battle was going and what the two deep might look like as Florida State heads into game number 1?
I thought there were a couple interesting things. One, the way he talked about KJ Kirkland was definitely impressive. And Mike Norvell's been talking him up, Tony White's been talking him up, and we know that he's in contention for a starting job. And KJ Kirkland last year as a true freshman started a bunch of games. He played, I believe he was still a true freshman last year. It might have been a redshirt freshman, but he played a lot last year at safety, started a bunch of games. And so, they've liked him. But I didn't know that that we should expect him to be a guy who's a difference maker, a guy that make game-changing type plays. But maybe we should have clued into that by the fact that he clearly was a favorite to win a starting job in early in preseason camp. It wasn't like nobody was doing anything and he eventually won the job. Like, it was really clear early in camp that KJ Kirkland was going to be a huge factor in the secondary, more so than a Shaheem Brown, more so than an Edwin Joseph and some of those other guys. And the way he talked, I can't remember the words he used today, but he had a phrase today, the way he talked about his physical, just his size and athletic ability, that stuck out to me, because he was not as effusive in praise for some other guys. Clearly we've made a point of pointing out that Shaheem Brown does not get a lot of love from this coaching staff. They do not talk him up really big. They haven't cast him aside. He did give him some credit for, coming to practice every day, even though he's not necessarily going to be a starter after starting for the last 2 years. He comes every day. He doesn't mope. He doesn't pout. He works. He's had a good attitude. So they gave him credit for that, but they have not given him a lot of credit for being a guy who has been a playmaker in practice. Even Edwin Joseph, who I think I've expected to be in the starting lineup, had a great spring, that has a ton of talent. He was not as effusive in praise about him. He, said, yeah, he's flashed a lot, but he's got to be more consistent. Those kinds of comments. KJ Kirkland, man, it just seems universally they're really high on him. And it just made me think maybe we need to expect KJ Kirkland to be a higher level player than certainly I probably expected.
Was the phrase, let's see, a big imposing guy that can cover? Was that it?
Yeah. He might have been imposing body, but yeah, he used the words imposing and then quickly went to he also can cover. And yeah, man, what else do you want from a safety?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So if I'm handicapping this out, I feel like in the beginning portion of this month, Tony White was speaking about Edwin and Earl and Edwin.
Yeah.
It was always, it wasn't quite like the twins when he's speaking about the Desirs, but typically when he brought up the guys in the secondary, Earl Little and Edwin Joseph were mentioned together. And KJ Kirkland was mentioned there as well. Don't get me wrong, but it's just those two were front and center.
And it felt like KJ and Ashlyn Barker were
Yep.
kind of battling for maybe who's going to be the third or fourth.
So if you're just going on mentions, then it could be that you have Earl Little, KJ Kirkland, Edwin Joseph as your next two, because you need three safeties in this defense. As a refresher, the Rover is a safety that's closer to the line of scrimmage. It's kind of like a slot corner, but it's called a Rover, and it's technically a safety in the defense. So you have three that you need, and it sounds like they've got three candidates. I'll put something in the comments if you're watching on Warchant TV. The interview that KJ Kirkland held in Jacksonville just a couple of weeks ago, I thought that was one of the most impressive interviews in camp. And Ira, you know this. There are guys who interview great and play like crap on the weekend. And then there are guys who are totally disinteresting in interviews, and they're just unbelievable on the field. So one doesn't belie the other. But when speaking on the defense, I felt that KJ Kirkland, who I also looked up, redshirt sophomore, is totally comfortable with what he's seeing with this defense, which last year on the field, the number one concern for him, at least from what I saw in my own analysis, he would hesitate at the moment. He would wait for something to happen, that extra tick, and he was dead in the water. It wasn't for a lack of size or speed. It just looked like he didn't know where to go. And that interview conducted in Jacksonville, as you can see at the bottom here of this video, he looked like somebody who the light bulb had clicked on, and there was relief that the game had slowed down for him. He could be a humongous weapon for Florida State. So potentially this is another guy who's won a big role in camp. Here's a third name, and his stock just keeps on climbing, and Ira keeps on bragging more and more. I feel like every time we're on the chant, we have to mention Jake Rizzi. Herb Hand spoke to the media this week. Of the players in the offensive line that he spoke the highest of, Luke Pettibon always is one of Herb Hand's favorite people.
He's the teacher's pet without question.
Jake Rizzi is now described as a dude, which in Herb Hand's nomenclature means that I can trust him. It almost sounds like, Ira, he's on the precipice of starting. I know, we both watched what Herb had to say, especially in that beginning portion when he's speaking on the 5 that he likes, or the 6, or maybe he might, the backup tackle that they have, their third tackle might actually be starting guard. It feels like Rizzi might have quietly crept into the starting 5. Am I wrong?
It's very possible. I really think it is possible. And I think, when we were having a offline discussion or an online discussion, but not public, on the staff, we were in our group text communication. And there were some discussions about that issue of, him not really Herb Hand not wanting to come off of his starting 5, but not that he wouldn't even name him, the fact that he wouldn't even admit he has a starting 5. And I think it's a direct correlation to that. I mean, I think Mike Norvell tipped it earlier where he said that, Jacob Rizzi might be competing for one of those starting jobs. And then he clarified he's speaking about the guard job, because we wondered maybe one of the tackles, maybe there's something going on there. Maybe that's why they need him there. But it sounds like he's competing for one of the starting guard jobs. And you have, I think people assume that Richie Leonard and Adrian Medley, the UCF transfer, would be the sure thing starting guards. But I think Jacob Rizzi has competed there, and I'm happy for him, man. This is one thing we talked about in the preseason. Well, back in the spring after the coaching change, that sometimes a new coaching staff comes in and it could go one of either way. I mean, I think we just talked about Shaheem Brown and the fact that Shaheem doesn't seem to be a huge part of this coaching staff's plans on the defensive staff for whatever reason. Maybe he hasn't adjusted well to the scheme. Maybe he's just not playing well, whatever it is. He's going to be part of the rotation, but Shaheem's if he's going to start at some point this season, he's going to have to really improve from what they had seen so far. Jacob Rizzi, maybe the other side of the spectrum. I do not think that Alex Atkins wanted to play him last year. For whatever reason, I don't think he liked what he saw at Jacob Rizzi, and he really liked the guys he had coming back to the point he's playing, the TJ Ferguson and Keandre Jones when Richie Leonard got hurt and they didn't have a lot of options. It took him a long time to go to Jacob Rizzi. And I wondered if a new coaching staff with just a new set of eyes would give him a different chance. And man, he is clearly blown Herb Hand away.
For Rizzi, it sounds like he's battling for exactly one of those interior spots. So maybe you have 3 for 2 at guard between Medley, Leonard, and Rizzi. Don't say that 5 times fast. It'll be very difficult to say. But it did sound like, and I know there was some blowback on this on the long form side with JCS. Like when I spoke to Herb Hand for the luncheon, I was really grateful for that assignment because I was curious. I wanted to know what his thoughts were. He clearly wanted the 5 starters that he thought were going to be the 5 to rep together, physically work together because they had not in spring. Okay, so that goal is, I think, mostly accomplished. Gus Malzahn has expressed as much and said he's relieved after the scrimmages that they got those reps in. A younger tackle, a second-string tackle that didn't have to come off the offensive line from a different position. Lucas Simmons was the name that he threw out there. He spoke on Lucas later in his media availability, but Ira, not in that crux when he's talking about, do you have the 8 that you like? I don't think that Herb has gotten the answers out of camp that he's wanted on that front just yet. But it sounds like he has 6 for 5. So there's good news and there's bad news for the offensive line, at least as it pertains to the Alabama game. Maybe a month later for Virginia, the picture changes. But I think Herb Hand is walking away from this camp answering some of the questions he wanted to, but certainly not all the questions he wanted to.
Now, where do you think Andre Otto fits? I mean, do you think he's 1A and 1B with Rizzi is like, because I mean, he's another guy that can play center or guard. But it seems like Rizzi maybe has passed him, which is understandable. Rizzi's 4 years older, 3 years older, and has played a whole lot more football. Do you think Otto is 7 in the interior? Do you think he's a factor at tackle still? Or do you think they would just go to one of the younger guys at tackle if they had to? Or is it Rizzi or someone else?
I feel like it's Rizzi's tackle 3, but he might be one of your starters, and then you slide up the missing man of Leonard and Medley into the spot for Rizzi. Like, let's just say disaster scenario, one of your tackles is out of the game for a series 4 against Alabama. I think Rizzi goes in, and then Medley Leonard takes Rizzi's spot.
Right.
Like Otto was mentioned as a leader, but clearly he's not one of your top options, because here's the other thing that Hand said. He's like, well, in some situations you might have where one of your starting guards is your primary backup tackle, and then you might have something where another guard is your second best center. Right. And like, well, that to me means that Otto is missing out of that equation, at least in this moment. Loves the kid's leadership and his work, and loves that he comes to practice every day and works hard, but isn't quite ready to be that primary guy. So this feels very 2013-ish, Ira, to me, when they had Austin Barron as the backup, and they needed
a whole lot of finger crossing.
Yeah, I think so. And he came in for a game because Stork got concussed, but then that was it. That line was continuous the rest of the year. Maybe they develop. You've got time. They're younger as the season goes along. But right now, I think you're working with 6, and that's it.
Well, the nice thing is you do, and you've made this point many times, you do have those 2 games and a bye week before you play Virginia. So in a perfect world, I'm guessing Herb Hand would really love to not have to dip below 6 in this opener against Alabama. Right. But you'd like to think, I mean, does Gunnar Hansen or Micah Pettis need a lot of reps against Kent State and East Texas A&M? So maybe you can develop some depth. Maybe, I guess what I'm saying from an optimistic point of view, maybe the answer changes a little bit about those younger guys by the time you get to Virginia. I think that's possible.
Yeah, a lot of the questions and a lot of, I think the friction you feel, like the bone-on-bone friction that you feel from these coaches is it's the ticking clock, and it's who can I trust for this opener? But they're going to get hundreds of reps when you combine both offense and defense over those next 2 games after Alabama to really get a feel for this. So I think part of it is just we feel up against it. By we, I mean they feel up against it for the Alabama game, and then you can go back to the drawing board and assess again. If you're into that thing, Ira, like a lot of our fans are right now on the Chant and on the message boards, and obviously on our multimedia forums. If you want to see development, games 2 and 3 this season are your thing. I mean, you will watch every single play of those games.
And it's important to remember that. I'm glad we brought this up and I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot during those weeks. But what this team looks like in the Alabama game, may not be what it looks like later in the year, and certainly may not be because there are guys that have ability to help that they may not feel comfortable playing a ton in this game. So, we don't know yet. Is Usman Kroma gonna get 15 touches in this game? Well, if he doesn't, he may add a completely different element when he starts getting to play. I think there's other guys on this team in similar situations where we don't know how much they're going to trust them against Alabama, but it's almost like in a baseball season where you've got some great prospects that they're just waiting for the right time to bring them up and give them a chance in the bigs, but maybe they don't make the opening day roster. Well, I think there's some guys on this roster that could change the complexion of this team if you weren't opening with Alabama. And that's going to be, I think just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying, if you get blown out, not to be upset or whatever. I'm just saying this team, there's more coming that you may not get to see in that opener.
Yeah, you're going to find out who are in the inner circle of trust in the Alabama game for both coordinators, which, as you're listening to this right now, is under 9 days away, because the kickoff, of course, is 3:30 on the 30th. So as you're listening to this and watching this on Warchant TV and Warchant podcasts, it's under 9 days away. Unbelievable. Please make sure to leave us a review, whether you love it, whether you hate it. Leave us a review on the podcast. Hit the thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to Warchant TV. It's always free. Head over to the website, warchant.com, for full head-to-toe coverage of what's going on. Florida State preseason camp now turning into Alabama prep. They began that this week. News, notes, nuggets, as well as recruiting info, because it's a home game, everybody. We're not used to this, Ira. These home games for openers. It's usually in Orlando, New Orleans, Dublin, Atlanta, not in Tallahassee. So Florida State is trying to make the most of a home recruiting weekend. And you can find also on these podcast feeds and Warchant TV tomorrow, the Warpath, which will have more on Florida State recruiting. Anything you want to promote, Ira, before we sign off tonight?
No, man, just that's it. But the chant is, we're just wetting your whistle here. There's a whole lot more coverage, as you said, at warchant.com. In-depth stories about all these things we talk about. We're giving you kind of the Reader's Digest version, but there's the full stories are really mapped out, and then you can discuss it on the message boards as well.
That's right. Debates are raging on the boards, and some staff might even be in on those, like me. We'll see you over there at warchant.com, and thanks for watching or listening to today's show.